All right, so I'll start with my stakeholders. So in this case, the first workflow that I'm modeling is the SH71 project that is currently being built near Austin, Texas. It's a highway project funded by TxDOT. So we have the general contractor, which is, of course, Zachary Construction Corporation. And we have the project owner, which is the Texas Department of Transportation. And so it really only focuses on those two stakeholders. And persona-wise, for the general contractors, we have project controls, most importantly for this workflow, as well as the project engineer and the foreman. And then for the project owner side, we have the project manager and the design engineer. And so I'll cover the systems of record and documents of record as we move through the workflow. The first shared pane occurs right off the bat. So it occurs during that transfer of the 3D model from the project owner to the general contractor. So we found that a lot of times these models are grouped in unrealistic ways. So the components are way too large for actual construction and 4D modeling. So all of the roads are grouped together and all of the columns are grouped together. So it's just not very realistic. And then there's mistakes in geometry and geolocation, as well as software format. The software is incompatible with the softwares that the general contractor wants to use. And so that leads us into the next issue. Because of all of those issues, the general contractor has to go through a lot more work to make that model usable for the field. So you can see this whole mess of a loop that has to occur. So right now we need to get the project model from Bentley MicroStation, which is what the project owner supplied us with, to Revit eventually. But there's no direct plugin from MicroStation to Revit. And then the plugin that does exist from Bentley is an export to SKP, which is SketchUp, but that has a bunch of errors that it makes whenever you do try to export it to SketchUp. And then lastly, the export from MicroStation directly into Synchro, which is the 4D scheduler, has errors with geometry as well. And so that causes this whole mess of multiple softwares necessary to make this model usable. So it has to be exported as an FBX file and then brought into Format where it's broken down into the components and then individually exported and reassembled in SketchUp, where each component is then broken down even further into usable pieces, and then finally gets to Revit and then Twinmotion where it's used for visualization. And then that leads us into the whole point of this whole process is to get to a workable 4D model. So once it's usable in Revit, it can be imported into Synchro, and combined with the project schedule, which is made in P6 Primavera. And the issue right now is we go through all of this work and the 4D model and schedule is created, but it's never used in the field. You can see that it's simply uploaded into ELO and no one in the actual project ever touches the 4D model. So the foreman and project engineer never use it. So that's the biggest issue right now, as well as you can see that ELO is being used as our point of exchange rather than the 4D model. So a lot of this work is being wasted. And so I'm going to go into another current state project that we have, which is the Lake Dunlap Dam project in New Braunfels, and show kind of the ideal current state for that first pain point that I discussed. So this one, we're actually getting the model directly from the design engineer. And in this case, it comes over as a Revit model. It's broken down into usable pieces, and the model is shared by link. So the general contractor always has the perfect kind of like model, the most up-to-date model, and they can add project controls to it. So as you can see, it moves from the design engineer into Synchro really, really fast. So that's kind of our ideal current state. And then I'll go back up to my future state way up here. Okay, so here's my future state for SH71. So that relies on that first step goes through a checkpoint now. So we have the project engineer actually approving or disapproving the model that comes through. So there's a little bit more communication now. So that model is checked for geometric integrity, geolocation, accuracy, the naming convention, and make sure it has all of the metadata, as well as making sure it comes in a usable format. And then it moves down to what used to be a pain point now becomes a shared gain. At this point, we see that those plugins and exports exist. They just have issues with them. So for the future state, we're assuming that the model can be transformed from MicroStation to whatever BIM modeler the general contractor wants to use at that point in time in a one-step solution, most likely, which will save time and unnecessary softwares and will allow for more frequent updates of the project. And then lastly, that allows for Synchro to become a system of record rather than a point in time document of record. So it's a living document now. It's constantly updated and everything kind of occurs through Synchro. So now we have the ability for the foreman and the project engineers to interact with it, make changes, see where efficiencies can be made up. And then eventually the actual animation can be shared with the project manager so they have the most up-to-date visual representation of what's going to happen. And then you can see that Synchro directly links with P6 Primavera. And so that allows for project controls to hand that off to project engineer, and they can export the XCR project or the XCR schedule that's required contractually and make that handoff to the project owner for final approval. So it just allows for a much cleaner, much more accurate workflow altogether. And it means that the 4D model is finally being used in the way that it's intended.
Well done.
Thank you.
Great
so
job,
as
Weston.
you can, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sharing your shared pains and shared gains. So yeah, go ahead and summarize.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to do. So as you can see, we go from an unusable 3D model to a model that's going to be checked for details and stuff and ensure that it's in a usable format. So it goes back to the whole point of CDX is that communication between owner and general contractor. And then we're taking a really inefficient path to process the model for field use and assuming that it's going to be fixed basically by the fact that the model will be pre-qualified before it even hits those steps. So you know you're working with a good model that will be useful in the 4D situation. And then finally, we go from the 4D model being a point in time document to assuming that it's going to be a real usable and like helpful thing because of all of this automatic synchronization that can occur. So just an overall much better usable workflow.
Awesome. All right. Round of applause for Weston. Great job. Any questions or comments from our judges? I know DJ, you're a BIM guy. I know I was getting visceral feeling the shared pains. It's like we're still dealing with this, but I think it is a reality.
Yeah, it's still a reality, and that just the whole model exchange, but then getting models to the field is always an issue, especially for even that type of like infrastructure, that more horizontal work. It's even more challenging, but there are more tools out there, including ours and others that are making the process a lot easier. The 4D schedule thing, that's a whole thing that Rob Sloyer and myself could talk about for a long time. And
don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. Yeah, Chisler's still coming up. Don't worry.
It's good. It's that process can be applied to a lot of things, even just basic document control or stuff like that. But finding ways to leverage the model for course and construction work is where we need to go as an industry, and we're getting there. Yep. Kicking and screaming, dragging people along, but we're going to get there.
I know. Yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes to learn this about the industry, but hey, but better to learn now and be able to do something about it than, be the old folks that have put up with it for this long. So
hey, awesome. He's talking about you, Rob.
No. Rob, well, Rob looks young. I don't know.